Hello everyone! Do you want to know if a servant is good enough to spend your hard-earned Saint Quartz on? Great, then you're in the right place. Today's topic servant is the Demon King of the Billion Heavens, Demon King Nobunaga, Mao Nobunaga herself. We will cover all the points that you can see on screen, but first, a fun fact with Nobu. This particular Nobu has a spirit origin that is the culmination of all possible Nobunagas, so technically you're getting infinite servants in one if you get her. Now, let's move to my personal opinion. In my personal opinion, Mao Nobunaga is very weak. It is with a heavy heart that I say this. She fills a very specific niche, most of her skills are weak, and she is focused on divine enemies, meaning that there is a small group of targets she's good against and a large group of targets she's not very good against. Worst of all for her, in a couple of months another AoE Avenger servant is going to release, who is better than Nobu at literally everything, including defeating even divine servants. It makes me sadder than Tristan to see how badly they did my poor girl dirty like this. So let's look into why. Mao Nobunaga is a 5-star Avenger-class servant, meaning she is super effective against rulers and weak versus moon cancers. Her attack at 90 is 12,641, which is one of the highest attacks for a 5-star servant in the game. It is in the top 10. Meanwhile, her HP at 90 is 11,761. This is the absolute lowest HP that any 5-star in the game has. Her hidden stats show that her MP gain per hit is 0.49%. This is pretty average. As for her cards, her Quick has 4 hits, her Arts has 4 hits, her Buster has 6 hits, and her Extra has 5 hits. Overall, these hit counts are a little above average, not bad at all. Her star weight, aka how easy it is to get stars on her star absorption, is a measly 30. This is very, very low. It's hard to get her to get crit stars on her cards. Her star creation rate is only 5.9%, also very low. And overall, when you put everything together, her stats come out to be a little below average. Her high attack stat is really all that's good. Meanwhile, she is saddled with low HP, low star gathering, star absorption, low star creation, and due to having a buster-focused deck, that NP gain, which is average, is actually below average because she can't make use of her cards, because Buster cards don't make much MP. Now looking at her deck and her MP, you can see that her deck is a 1 Arts card, 1 Quick card, 3 Buster cards, Buster-focused Gorilla deck. Her Noble Phantasm, Hachu-Enjo, Sanzen Daisen Tenmao, Papias Metamorphosis, Demon King of a Billionfold Heavens, is an AoE Buster NP with an awesome freaking name. It has 6 hits, which deal damage, remove any divine enemy's defensive buffs, and this will activate before dealing damage, inflicts a burn with 1,000 damage per turn for 5 turns to any enemies, and deals extra damage to divine enemies based on the overcharge. This is a strong NP against divine enemies, and against everything else, it is painfully weak. You can see that all of her excess effects, with the exception of her burn, are tied to hitting divine enemies, and that's it. There are not very many divine rulers to deal with, and there are not very many divine berserkers to deal with, so she can't really make use of her class advantage that much for that. It does mean she'll deal a little better with your non-super effective divine classes that she'll face, but it's really not a niche that you're looking for, especially as an Avenger. And on top of that, her overcharge effect is quite weak, starting at 150 and only scaling to 200%. It is a really weak scale and not worth the trouble of trying to get the extra charge onto her. Moving on to her passives, first off we have Avenger B-, which increases her MP generation while taking damage by 17.5%, and reduces the party's debuff resistance by 7.5%, with the exception of herself, as a demerit. She has Oblivion Correction E, increasing her critical damage by 2%, and Self-Replenishment Magic C, which charges her NP gauge by 3.3% per turn. None of these passives are all that great. Her best is probably the self-replenishment magic, because it is a nice little passive NP gain, but all the numbers on these are so incredibly low that they basically all do nothing. They're all basically nothing. She might as well not have any passives at all. Most of the time, you're not even going to notice any of her passives doing anything. Moving on to her skills, I have a slightly different layout here. First off, we have It's Inevitable. This increases Nobu's attack every turn for 3 turns. Her attack increases by 10 to 20% based on level per turn, and she can start with 20 or 30 to 30% starting on turn 1. It also gives her a buff which will create a burning battlefield for those 3 turns, and finally will inflict burn upon herself as a demerit with 1000 damage for 3 turns every turn. This is overall a great skill. It is easily her best skill. It starts with a nice 30% attack up. It gains 20% more each turn for a huge 70% by its last turn. The debuff is not all that bad. It can be cleansed easily enough if you give a command code to her cards. This is a very good skill. It even gives you the Burning Battlefield, which unfortunately she doesn't really make too much use of, but it is a nice way to get that if you're trying to use some sort of synergy like, say, Berserker Nobu. Moving on to her second skill, As If It Was a Dream. This is a skill that will give Nobu invincibility for 1 turn, and increase her buff removal resistance by 50 to 100% for 1 turn. It eventually will get a further strengthening. Ooh, look how small it is. Let me make that bigger for you. There you go. A further strengthening, which will also increase her damage against Sky Attribute enemies on a burning battlefield, so that comes into play, by 30 to 50%. Even with the buff, this skill is awful. It's on a long cooldown, being on a 6-turn cooldown for a 1-turn buff, I guess, until the last, until she gets her strengthening. And even after it gets her strengthening, it increases her damage against a very small set of enemies. Sky Attribute enemies is not the most common attribute out there. Now, usually Sky Attributes do line up with Divine Attributes, so they tend to mesh together and give her even more strength against Divine enemies. But, again, you're just stacking another very small niche on top of a very small niche, and making her good against basically the same enemy she was already good against. This doesn't cover her weaknesses. It just kind of reinforces a strength that nobody is looking for that much, to be honest with you. And finally, we have her third skill, Demon King of the Sixth Heaven. Very fitting. This gives Nobu a star regeneration buff for 3 turns that will produce 5 to 10 stars per turn, and also gives her an NP charge of 10 to 20%. That is, pathetic. Pathetic is the word I'm looking for. A 20% self-MP charge on a 5-star? That's it? That's terrible. That's awful. You're giving up 30% more NP gain on your charge for what? 10 stars a turn? This skill is garbage. They should fire whoever gave her this skill. I want whoever designed this skill for her at my desk today. I'll fire them myself. Meanwhile, other servants have a 50% MP charge and 4 other very good abilities tied to the same skill. Cough, cough, Summer BB, cough, cough. And that's not a problem, but 20% is it? Ugh, this is insulting. Terrible. How dare they? With these skills in her MP, you can see that Nobu is designed to kill divine units. Most divine units have the Sky attribute, like I said before. You add her buffs together and she has a very good set of design murdering prowess. However, 2 of her skills suck. Her one good skill has a pretty extreme detriment if you do not cleanse it. 3,000 damage is nothing to sneeze at. And against non-divine units, Nobu's damage is honestly low. Very low. So, at the end of the day, all of this comes together to say that they hate Nobu, and they wanted to insult everyone that likes Nobu, apparently. You can tell I'm upset about this. Now, what materials do we need to level these shitty garbage skills? Well, to make an already bad servant even worse, her material costs are incredibly high as Malnobu is an Avenger. That means that instead of using skill gems, she's all materials, baby. For each skill, she is going to require 10 horseshoes, 10 chains, 12 lamps, 12 spinal fluids, 12 magatamas, 15 gunpowders, 15 bells, and 15 reactor cores. Meaning, if you want to max out all 3 of her skills, you're going to need 30 horseshoes, 30 chains, 36 lamps, 36 spinal fluids, 36 magatamas, 45 gunpowders, 45 bells, and 45 reactor cores. That's a lot of materials. Some of them are relatively recent materials from recent Lost Belts, and a lot of recent servants have needed them, which means there's high competition for that. Nothing has an incredibly high cost, but everything there is a lot when put together. Well, how does Malnobu stack up against her competition? You might be able to guess by what I've been saying. As an AoE 5-star Avenger, her competitions include Edmund Dantes, and I am including Space Ishtar, who comes out in several months. And both Dantes and Space Ishtar absolutely crush Nobu in usability. Dantes works incredibly well as a double Scotty setup for looping, creating lots of stars, doing lots of damage, and being able to loop against just about anything. Space Ishtar is going to be able to work with double Scotty, and she'll be able to work with Castoria because she is a special princess that can choose what color her NP card is, so she can work in any and all metas. Dante is the king of general quick looping, while Space Ishtar is everything Malnobu wants to be and more. She has a 50% self-charge, higher damage than Malnobu against any type of enemy except Divine Sky after Malnobu gets her strengthening, and she can loop both quick and art style, or she can just go with Merlin if you want to bust her as hard as you can. Nobu is bad, and both of her competitions are really, really good, with Space Ishtar when she comes out being one of the best servants in the game. And she's only gonna take a couple months before she shows out to bring a further slap to the face. Malnobu is unfortunately left to hang and dry. Now, if you roll for Nobu, skill priority is something that you should think about. Start with skill 1 as it is her only good skill, then go for skill 3 since it does provide some stars and a pitiful MP charge, it is helpful, and then finally skill number 2, because skill number 2 sucks with its scaling and doesn't really do much of anything, to be honest. So that's what I would suggest your priority be. Moving on to craft essences. If you want to equip Nobu with a craft essence, she is an AoE buster damage-dealing Avenger. Your best free-to-play craft essence is generally going to be your Aerial Drive, 10% buster performance increase, 10% MP damage up, and a 50% starting MP gauge are all good things for any buster servant to start with. You could also try to make use of crits and her star production with something like Victor of the Moon, which will give you a 10 or 15% buster performance up, and a 20 or 25% at max limit broken critical damage increase. However, I will advise against this in general because Nobu's extremely low star gathering rate and extremely low star production rate, with the exception of her ability, means that even if you bring Nobu with 2 allies that have max limit broken 20-30s, you're still not going to be able to guarantee crits on Nobu because she's really bad at making stars. As for servants to pair her up with, oh look, it's Waver! Hi, Waver! What a surprise! He has a 50% MP charge over his skills, defense up, attack up, crit up. He works with anyone. He's always going to be on this list forever. Since Nobu is a buster servant, Merlin is the best possible support you can bring with her due to her 20% MP charge, Merlin having a 20% MP charge, 20% attack up, 50% buster up, and 100% crit damage up for a turn, along with his MP providing star regeneration and NP regeneration and healing. He's everything you could possibly want as a buster support, and does everything Nobu wants. He's fantastic. And finally, for your budget conscientious people bringing a support, you can bring my man William Shakespeare. He brings a 20% MP charge for an ally, and a massive 50% buster up for a single turn, for that big turn that you need to do a lot of damage. Now, there is a servant I didn't add here that will be out in about a year and a half or so from now, and I didn't add him because it's going to be so long you'll forget he even exists. So, Nobukatsu will just have to wait until he shows up for us to talk about him. So, too long didn't watch here. Nobu's bad. She's legitimately one of the worst 5 stars in the game. She can do decent damage against divine enemies, but other than that very small niche, she's easily outpaced by her competition. She is in desperate need of buffs, and she just has bad skills. It's almost like she was a very old prototype servant, and then they learn from their mistake when Space Ishtar comes out. But if you do need a good reason to roll for her, I can give you the best reason of all. Sexy Nobu in skin-tight outfit is very hard to ignore. So if you want a sexy Nobu in a skin-tight outfit, this is the servant to roll for. If you enjoyed this video, check out my Twitch channel, like the video, subscribe, all that stuff. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this helps you make a decision. Good luck on your rolls, and thanks again. See you next time on the next Gacha Guide.